Hey guys, well here's another update on our Super Duty Derby truck. Hey guys, Alex here from All For Him Racing, and today giving you another update on our build for this Super Duty Derby truck. So, what has been happening since the last video? You can see we got this thing up on jack stands, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But since the last video, we've been hard at work knocking out a few of the big things. First one you'll see is when I open the door here. You'll see we got the cage all welded in. So we went ahead and did the side pieces there. So we put those in first. Then we did the dash bar side to side. And then we did the rear bars. Now this is a unique set of rules that we are building this for, and it is the only place that I'm aware of. I mean, maybe somebody else has different rules, but typically you just have one straight bar that can go across from cage bar to cage bar, and that's it. And then maybe you have some down bars that go right to the frame. We're not allowed to do that for this set of rules. We cannot go to the frame. But what it requires is you are allowed to do what is more of like an X pattern here. So you can put some plate steel over on that side and run a bar from your main cross piece all the way down into the floor. And then you're also allowed to do the same thing on the other. However, the other rule you're not allowed to do is you're not allowed to tie these two together, and they cannot be, spliced together. So you can't have one piece coming off this surface and another one on the bottom side coming. They have to be two independent pieces to make an X. So that's what we've gone ahead and done, because that's what the rules allow, and for the max protection. And with this truck being a little rustier, I figured it couldn't hurt to be safe. So that's what all that tubing was used for in the previous video. We also went ahead and changed some of the body bolts. So you can see we got that one there, and then we got another one on the other side. Those have been changed with grade 8 bolts that are now through bolted with nuts on the bottom, versus the stock ones that were basically threaded into the washer part of the isolator. So I've had issues in the past when you leave them stock of those ripping out. And so I just wanted something more firm on the bottom side. See if I can get the camera to cooperate. So you can see we have the couple washers and the nut there compressing the rubber mount. And the reason the rubber is still in there, some of you guys are probably thinking, why didn't you take that out? Well, the rules say no body mount modifications, and you must have the stock rubber in place. So that's what we did. And you were allowed to change the bolts, but you have to use the exact same size. So I had 1/2" bolts, so we used 1/2" grade 8 bolts, changed them out, through bolt, had to drill out those little, the threaded piece there at the very bottom so we could get the bolt through. Wasn't that big a deal. And then that way we have a nice solid connection going on both sides, so that way it's less likely to rip out. Also went ahead and patched the floor. So we've got that patched, and we're in the process of changing the other front body mount bolts. That one's already been done. The other side needs to be finished up. But we got the whole, if you guys recall, there's some pretty significant holes in the floor. So we went ahead and patched that up with some extra sheet metal that we had sitting around from another Derby car that we had built way back in the day. Don't even know what that one was from, but we reclaimed it and used it up. Got the seat in its final location. Sorry about the seat belt's kind of in the way. Just had that pulled away for doing welding and whatnot. Gonna have to get the back of the seat put back on, but I'm not gonna do that until we're more ready to get like the fuel line and stuff figured out, so that way I can cut the hole for that prior to putting that all back together. The other thing we fabricated here was the mount for the steering wheel. So this one was a little bit more of a unique challenge. The way that this steering column mounts is there's a framework that is behind the main dash, or behind the front fascia of the dash that you see when you get in the truck. And it was just a series of tubes that went back and forth, and the mount for the steering wheel was actually on that feature. You can see the tube here. So what I did was I cut it on each side, and it actually was rotated the other direction. So it rotated this way. The tube was actually up in here, if that makes sense. There's bolts here and a bolt here. So I took this whole thing, it was perfect, you know, symmetrical from side to side. So I took it, rotated it 180 degrees, so that way the tube was more towards the back of the truck. I then also notched it because there was metal that was here. It was kind of like a C-channel feature that was here, so I basically notched that out and made it flat, and then that allowed me to be able to weld this to my cage, and I kind of set this bar based on where I needed the steering wheel to be. Now, from the factory location, the steering wheel is a little bit farther forward and just ever so slightly lower, but it actually sets the angle even better with the steering box, so I think that'll be good. And it because it's a little farther forward, that allows for more extension on the front side, so I think this is a good segue to move towards the front of the truck. So we have the main linkage that comes out from the steering column and then goes down to the steering box. Well, now this expansion joint has been compressed about an extra 1.5 to 2 inches because of where I moved the steering wheel. And you guys see something else sitting there. We got the motor in place. So motor is now in its final location. We were able to take the old motor mounts that we had used in our previous Chevy Derby truck. We just cut them down and used our same spacers and welded it onto the frame, so that is sitting where it needs to. And thankfully our transmission support mount that we already had bolted right into place on the cross member. I was really surprised, but it ended up bolting right up. The only downside that was with this whole scenario was that my drive shaft, unfortunately, was literally 1.5 inches short from where I really needed it to be. From taking the one from that Chevy truck that we had torn apart, I almost thought it would work perfect, but I just didn't like how far it was pulling out of the transmission, so went ahead and put a little bit of an extender in line there, but we got the drive shaft on now too, so that's all good to go. And it's just good to see the motor sitting in the place. So a few comments here. Obviously we put it as far back as we could using the original cross member and the mounts that we had. It does sit the motor back a little bit from where it was stock. However, there is not like a super ton amount of room before the radiator. There's probably going to be about 1 foot when it's all said and done. So I mean, that's still fairly significant, but it's not, you know, outside of the realm of what maybe a stock big car would have. So unfortunately, didn't sit it back as far as maybe I was hoping. There is a ton of room. I'm just going to see if I can get my camera down in here. There's a ton of room between the motor and the firewall, so that is really good. If you guys run Chevy motors and you got your distributor back there, you got plenty of room to be able to play with. Obviously Ford, we got it up front, but if you had a Chevy motor in here, then you'd have plenty of room. So definitely impressed with how well that was able to go in. And the big 5.4 that was in it, and I say big in the fact that it just was a bulky motor. It's no bigger than this one. This one is a 5.8 liter engine that I put in it, and I took a 5.4 out. So this is actually a slightly bigger motor than what was in it stock, but scale wise, it's definitely smaller. It sits a lot lower. It's just not as heavy, not as big. I'm definitely happy that with the selection to put this motor in here versus keeping the stock one in. I should have plenty of room for the carburetor and, you know, air cleaner and all that sort of thing. Got some new headers on order, so I'll feature those in another video for you guys. We're going with a forward dump style, so that way it gets the exhaust farther away from the firewall and puts it right out towards the front. Also, we'll leave, you know, good clearance for the master cylinder, so that way we don't have issues there. I may do some kind of a heat wrap. I definitely already am thinking about it for the fuel lines, using some kind of a heat shield protection. You can see I got ones for the spark plug wire boots. Want to do the same thing for my fuel lines and some of the other cabling that runs across the motor. And because this is plastic, I probably should wrap the sides of it in some, you know, heat protection, especially this side, just to kind of try to help with some of the temperatures underneath the hood, so that way we're not melting the master cylinder or anything like that. That would be really bad. Alright, so thinking about what else we've done since the last video, we've also gone ahead and cleaned up a lot of the brake lines. So a lot of that stuff has been removed from along the frame. That's all been taken out. Do have a change of plans though. We were originally planning on running just the rear brakes. However, the rear calipers that were on this thing were just really nasty and really rusty, and were just not going to be usable, and they're expensive to replace. So we are actually going to run just front brakes. It's maybe not the safest thing because, you know, your main drive wheels are in the back, so you hit the brakes, they're not going to really be slowing down a whole lot at all. So, but the vehicle can come to a stop, which is what's needed in the derby arena and driving in the pits. So we're going to do that, and for sure we may, if we have time, try to re-tackle and putting some rear brakes on. However, I'm going to just put the front calipers back on. I bought some cheap hoses off Rock Auto that are going to make it work for a lot less than buying new calipers. A new caliper for the rear end is, you know, still going to be like 30 bucks, and I got new hoses for a lot less than that. So, you know, just trying to figure out what works best. We just need to have working brakes, so we're going to make sure that we have that ready to go, and that'll be done. So the last thing is the wheels. Why is this thing up on jack stands? Well, we'll just step out of the shop here real quick, and I will show you. We've got some tires ready to go to put on this truck. So we took all the old stock rims and tires, ripped all the tires off of them, and we had some tires that we have purchased over this past year when the deals allowed, and we have some new tires. We got some front ones there. They're nice and tall. They're going to be good steer tires, and then we're going to run these guys on the back. Now again, you're probably thinking, hey, why don't you use some forklift tires or some, you know, skid steer tires? Well, again, this is a unique set of rules. It's a pretty stock build, and unfortunately what that means is you have to have DOT approved tires on your drive wheels. And so that's what we're going to run. We're going to run DOT approved snow tires that will allow us to get through the mud well, as well as staying within the rules. They're all load range E, and you know, they're good strong tires. They're really heavy actually, just the wheel around. So we're going to be throwing those guys back on the truck here. We were just doing that yesterday, and so we'll have this thing ready to roll and move again, and then we'll be really progressing. So next steps, we have a long list of things to do, and only about a month. I think we have just under a month at this point to get this thing built. So like 3.5 weeks, something like that. And so the next steps, I think, are going to be getting this front end put back together. We're going to get the new fenders that we had gotten put back on there. We're going to get the wiring harness all installed to the motor. Shifter, got one on order, so you guys can check that out. We're going to have a cable shifter on this thing finally, so excited about that. C6 transmission is not a popular one, so it took a little hunting to find somebody that makes one, but we found one, and for a good deal, so you guys will find out more details in a future video on that. We're also need to get the battery box mounted, the fuel line installed, and then, you know, then typical modifications and stuff. We got to get the doors welded, leaf clamps on, bumper bolted on the front. We're going to swap out this bed. It's just all takes time, but we're going to keep plugging away. So I'm going to stop talking here, guys, and that way I can get some more work done on this truck and get some more footage for you guys to be able to catch an update on. So there you go, guys. There's an update on our Super Duty Derby truck build that is progressing here, and hopefully you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure to give us a thumbs up and consider subscribing if you have not already done so. As always, I hope you guys have a great day, and until the next video, we'll talk to you later.